My name is Vicky, and at 58 years old, I thought I had seen it all. For 35 years, I sacrificed everything for my son Ethan. My career, my health, my dreams. But nothing prepared me for the day he looked me in the eye and said, "Stop wasting my money." Something inside me broke that day. The people we love the most can hurt us the deepest. What I did next would change both our lives forever. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. I was once a promising art student in Chicago with dreams as colorful as my canvases. At 22, I met Derek at a gallery opening. He was charming, ambitious, and completely swept me off my feet. Our whirlwind romance lasted only 3 months before I discovered I was pregnant. When I told him, his charm evaporated instantly. "This is your problem, not mine," he said, packing his things. I never wanted kids. By nightfall, he was gone, along with any illusion I had of a happy family. My parents suggested adoption. "You have your whole future ahead of you, Vicky," my mother pleaded. "Art school, your career. A baby will change everything." She was right, but not in the way she meant. I placed my hand on my belly and knew instantly I would keep this child. I would love enough for 2 parents. The next day, I dropped to part-time at art school and picked up 2 additional jobs, waiting tables in the morning and cleaning offices at night. By my 7th month, I was working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and saving every penny. Ethan arrived during the worst blizzard Chicago had seen in 20 years. No one could reach me, so I took a taxi to the hospital, alone, terrified, but determined. 16 hours later, I held my son for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine in a silent promise. "It's just you and me, buddy," I whispered. Those early years were a blur of exhaustion. My apartment was a converted storage room above a laundromat, all I could afford. I worked at a department store during the day and waitressed at night while a neighbor watched Ethan. My art supplies gathered dust in the corner. When Ethan was 4, I noticed he was exceptionally bright. He deserved better schools than our neighborhood offered. So I moved us to a tiny 1-bedroom in a better district. I took the couch for the next 10 years so he could have the bedroom. Each month was a financial tightrope walk. There were nights I fed Ethan dinner while telling him I had already eaten, then went to bed hungry. My winter coat lasted 12 seasons, patched and repatched until the original fabric was barely visible. Dating was an impossible luxury. Between work and being a mom, there was no time, no money, and frankly, no energy. When I was 35, I developed chronic back pain from years of standing at retail jobs. The doctor recommended physical therapy I couldn't afford. Instead, I swallowed over-the-counter pain pills and kept going. Despite everything, I managed to put away $50 most months into Ethan's college fund. Sometimes it meant choosing between electricity and water, paying one late to keep the other on. But watching Ethan thrive made every sacrifice worthwhile. By middle school, he was getting straight A's, devouring books about business and finance. "I'm going to be rich someday, Mom," he would say. "And I'll buy you a big house." I believed him. I believed in him. When he won the science fair in 8th grade, I spent 2 weeks' grocery money to buy him a calculator he wanted. I ate ramen noodles and felt it was a bargain just to see his smile. Every parent makes sacrifices. But looking back, I realize mine were extreme. I never took a vacation, never bought new clothes, never went to a doctor, until something was unbearable. Everything was for Ethan. Everything was worth it to see him succeed. Or so I thought. As Ethan entered high school, the sweet boy who once brought me dandelions transformed into an ambitious young man. He joined every club that would look good on college applications, studied relentlessly, and graduated as valedictorian. His hard work paid off with multiple scholarship offers. We celebrated when the letter from Wharton arrived, a partial scholarship to his dream school. I cried tears of joy that night and tears of anxiety the next morning when I calculated the remaining costs. "We'll figure it out," I assured him, though I had no idea how. I remortgaged my small condo, took a second job, and still had to take out Parent Plus loans in my name. The debt was crushing, but watching Ethan walk onto that ivy-covered campus made it seem worthwhile. During his college years, our weekly phone calls gradually shortened. His voice changed, adopting the confident tone of his professors and classmates from wealthy families. He spent summers interning at prestigious firms rather than coming home. "It's an investment in my future, Mom," he explained when I expressed disappointment. I understood. I had always taught him to reach for the stars. I just hadn't expected how lonely the ground would feel without him. When Ethan graduated with honors, I sat in the audience wearing the one nice outfit. I owned a navy dress suit, purchased at a thrift store, and carefully tailored to hide its age. After the ceremony, Ethan introduced me to his friends and their parents. I noticed how he slightly winced at my simple clothing, my worn hands, my Midwestern accent that contrasted with the polished tones around us. He landed a job at a top financial firm in Boston immediately after graduation. His starting salary was more than I had ever made in my best year. I helped him move into his first apartment, a sleek downtown unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and granite countertops. "This must cost a fortune," I said, trying to keep the worry from my voice. "It's an investment in networking," he replied, using a term I was hearing more frequently. Location matters in finance. Within months, designer suits replaced his college wardrobe. An expensive watch appeared on his wrist. He began sending me checks on my birthday and Christmas, $500 with cards signed quickly, as if an afterthought. When Thanksgiving approached, I saved for a plane ticket to visit. "Actually, Mom, I'll be in the Hamptons with my boss," he said when I called. "Networking opportunity. You understand." I did understand, though it hurt. I spent the holiday alone, looking through old photo albums. The following year, Ethan met Allison at a charity gala. She came from money. Old money, as Ethan explained it. Her family owned property throughout New England. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Their wedding was at her parents' estate in Connecticut. 200 guests, a 5-course dinner, and a band that had apparently played for celebrities I'd never heard of. I wore the same navy suit, freshly dry cleaned. I felt Allison's mother assessing me when we were introduced. "And what do you do, Vicky?" she asked. "I'm in retail management," I said, which sounded better than "I sell shoes at the mall." She nodded politely and drifted away. Throughout the reception, I sat at a table with distant relatives no one else wanted to deal with. Ethan stopped by, briefly kissing my cheek before being pulled away by photographers. When they bought their 5-bedroom colonial in an exclusive suburb, I sent them a small watercolor I had painted of their wedding venue. It was the first time I'd picked up a brush in years. Ethan sent a polite thank you note that felt like it could have been written to any guest. At 55, my body finally gave out. Decades of standing on concrete floors had destroyed my knees. The store offered early retirement with a modest pension. It wasn't enough to live on comfortably, but with careful budgeting and Social Security, I could manage a small one-bedroom apartment. Ethan's financial gifts continued, but always came with questions. "What are you spending on groceries these days, Mom?" he would ask. "Have you considered a cheaper phone plan?" Each question felt like a tiny needle pricking the balloon of maternal pride I'd carried all these years. But I smiled and thanked him, grateful for any connection. When he mentioned expanding their house for a nursery, I made a decision. I sold my condo, paid off what debt I could, and moved to a rental apartment just 20 minutes from Ethan and Allison. I dreamed of being a hands-on grandmother, of finally having the time with my son that decades of working multiple jobs had stolen from us. My new apartment was nothing special, a one-bedroom unit in an older building that had seen better days. But it was clean, affordable, on my pension, and most importantly, close to Ethan. From my small balcony, I could almost see the neighborhood where his colonial sat behind manicured hedges and a wrought iron gate. The first weekend after moving in, I baked his favorite lemon squares and drove over excitement bubbling in my chest. When I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed 3 luxury cars parked there. I hesitated, but decided to knock anyway. Allison answered her perfect smile, faltering when she saw me. "Vicky, we weren't expecting you." Behind her, I caught glimpses of well-dressed people with wine glasses, the sound of jazz and laughter floating from their sunken living room. "I'm sorry," I said, embarrassment heating my cheeks. "I should have called first." Ethan appeared beside her, tension in his shoulders. "Mom, we're hosting a dinner for my colleagues. Could we do this another time?" I nodded, offering the lemon squares. "Of course. I just wanted to drop these off." "Thanks," he said, taking the container without opening it. "I'll call you tomorrow to schedule something." The door closed, and I stood there a moment longer, feeling like a stranger rather than family. The next day, Ethan did call as promised. We established a routine. Sunday dinners once a month, scheduled 2 weeks in advance. Better than nothing, I told myself. The first dinner was pleasant enough. Allison served an elaborate meal with ingredients I couldn't pronounce, let alone afford. They talked about their recent trip to Bali, showing photos of private villas and infinity pools. "How's the new place working out?" Ethan finally asked. "It's perfect," I lied. "Great location." The truth was more complicated. My apartment's heating was unreliable, the neighbors loud, and the management unresponsive. But complaining felt ungrateful when Ethan had helped with the security deposit. As months passed, our scheduled dinners were frequently canceled. Ethan's working late again. Allison would text always at the last minute. Or, "We've been invited to the Johnsons." Rain check. When we did meet, Allison's subtle digs became more pronounced. "That's a cute blouse, Vicky. Is that back in style now?" Or, "We're thinking of having the kitchen remodeled. The current one is only 4 years old, but it's so dated, don't you think?" Meanwhile, my financial situation grew increasingly precarious. Property taxes in the area had risen, pushing my rent up. My arthritis made it difficult to work even part-time jobs. Inflation ate away at my fixed income. I tried applying for positions I could manage, bookstore clerk, receptionist, but was consistently passed over for younger applicants. One hiring manager actually said, "We need someone who can grow with the company," as if at 57, I was already 1 foot in the grave. One evening, my debit card was declined at the pharmacy when I tried to pay for my arthritis medication. "Insufficient funds," the cashier announced loudly. Humiliated, I returned home to check my bank statement. Between the rent increase and the utility bills, I had miscalculated. I was $11 short. The next day, Ethan called unexpectedly. "Mom, I noticed your account is overdrawn," he said. "How would you know that?" I asked, confusion turning to realization. "Are you monitoring my account? We set up a joint account last year, remember? For emergencies, I get the alerts." I vaguely recalled signing paperwork, though I'd thought it was just so he could deposit his occasional checks. "I'm handling it," I said, pride stiffening my voice. "We should talk about budgeting," he replied. "I could help you set up a spreadsheet to track expenses." That Sunday, Ethan arrived alone for dinner. As I served the simple pasta I'd prepared, he launched into a lecture about financial responsibility, how I should consider a roommate, how I should switch to generic medications, all while wearing a watch that cost more than my car. "I've transferred some money to cover the overdraft," he said finally. "But Mom, you need to be more careful. I work hard for my money." His money. As if I hadn't worked hard every day of my life. As if the loans in my name that paid for his education weren't still being deducted from my Social Security checks. 2 weeks later, scrolling through social media, I saw photos Allison had posted. Her and Ethan on a yacht in the Mediterranean. Her caption read, "Surprise anniversary trip, 7 days of pure luxury." I stared at the images, the champagne, the private chef, the endless blue water. The comments were filled with friends envying their couple goals, lifestyle. Meanwhile, I had been eating canned soup to stretch my budget until the end of the month. At my next doctor's appointment, the specialist recommended a new treatment for my worsening arthritis. "It would significantly improve your quality of life," he explained. "Unfortunately, with your insurance, the out-of-pocket would be about $400 monthly." I nodded as if considering it, knowing it was impossible. That night, Ethan called to cancel our dinner again. In the background, I could hear Allison discussing renovations with someone. "No, the marble has to be Italian. We want the best," she was saying. "Everything okay, Mom?" Ethan asked when I went quiet. "Just tired," I replied. "Make sure you're getting enough rest," he said automatically. "Talk soon." My birthday arrived the following week. I received no call, no card, not even a text. When I called Ethan that evening, Allison answered. "Oh, he's in Chicago for a conference," she said. "Did he forget to mention it? I'm sure he'll call tomorrow." He didn't. 3 days later, a belated e-card arrived in my inbox. "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry it's late. Crazy busy at work. Love, Ethan." 60 seconds. That's how long it would have taken to send it on the actual day. I looked around my small apartment at the life I had built around the hope of being close to my son, and wondered if I even existed to him anymore outside of financial obligation. By spring, my arthritis had become so severe that some mornings I struggled to dress myself. The generic medications provided minimal relief, but the better options remained financially out of reach. I spent hours calculating and recalculating my pension against rising costs. Then came the certified letter from my landlord. Rent would increase by 23% when my lease renewed in 60 days. It was an impossible sum. Nearly 70% of my monthly income would go to housing alone. For 3 days, I researched alternatives. Senior housing had 5-year waiting lists. Moving to a cheaper area would mean being hours from medical specialists I now regularly needed. Roommate situations were scarce for someone my age. With no other options, I finally swallowed my pride and called Ethan. "Can we have dinner this Sunday? There's something important I need to discuss." To my surprise, he agreed immediately. "Come to the house. Allison is making coq au vin." That Sunday, I drove through the imposing gates of their neighborhood, past houses that seemed to grow more extravagant each visit. Their colonial stood proudly at the end of a curved driveway, recently painted in fashionable gray with crisp white trim. Allison greeted me with her usual air kiss beside each cheek. "Vicky, come in. Love that cardigan. So practical." The foyer opened to their cavernous living room, recently redecorated since my last visit. An enormous abstract painting dominated one wall, the kind of art I had once dreamed of creating. The dining room showcased a new table that could easily seat 16, though just 3 places were set with gleaming china and crystal. "Wine," Ethan offered, already pouring from an expensive-looking bottle. "Just water, please," I said, knowing alcohol would interact with my medication. Throughout the elaborate meal, I picked at my food, rehearsing what to say. Allison chattered about their recent charity gala, naming celebrities I vaguely recognized. As she served dessert, individual chocolate soufflés, I finally spoke up. "I need to talk to you about something important," I said, my voice smaller than intended. Ethan set down his spoon. "What's going on?" I explained about the rent increase, my calculations, the impossibility of making ends meet. "I've looked at every option," I concluded. "I hate asking, but I need help. Not alone this time. I can't take on more debt." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for hours. Ethan exchanged a glance with Allison that contained an entire conversation. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Mom, we just put a lot of money into our investment properties. And the kitchen renovation starts next week," Allison added. "I understand," I said quickly. "Maybe just temporarily, until I can figure something out." Ethan leaned back, his expression hardening into something I'd never seen before. "The thing is, Mom, we've been helping you for years. The joint account, the deposits, covering overdrafts." "I never asked," I began. "You didn't have to ask," he continued, his voice rising. "But it adds up. Do you have any idea what we've spent? And now you want more." The room began to spin slightly. I gripped my water glass to steady myself. "I worked 3 jobs to raise you," I said softly. "I went hungry so you could eat." "That was your choice," he shot back. "And I'm grateful, but I have my own family to think about now. Allison and I want children soon. We have priorities." "I'm not a priority." The words slipped out before I could stop them. That's when it happened. Ethan slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. "Stop wasting my money," he shouted. "I work 70-hour weeks while you sit in that apartment watching TV. You could get a job. You could sell those old art supplies you never use. You could do something besides expecting handouts." Allison nodded beside him, her perfectly manicured hand on his arm in solidarity. I sat, frozen, each word a physical blow. This was my son, the baby I'd cradled during fevers, the boy whose science projects I'd helped build at midnight after working double shifts, the teenager whose college applications I'd reviewed until my eyes burned. "I should go," I whispered, rising on shaking legs. "Mom, wait." Ethan began, his tone already softening into regret. But I was already moving toward the door, dignity the only thing keeping me upright. In the driveway, tears blurred my vision so badly I had to sit in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. The entire way home, his words echoed in my head. "Stop wasting my money, as if the loans in my name didn't exist, as if the second job I'd worked to buy his first computer didn't matter, as if the retirement fund I'd sacrificed to pay his graduate school application fees was irrelevant. Back in my apartment, I sat in darkness until dawn broke. Sleep wouldn't come, but as the first light crept through my windows, something else arrived instead. Clarity. 3 days passed where I moved as if in a trance, my mind racing while my body went through automatic motions. Make coffee, take medication, stare at bills, repeat. Ethan called twice, leaving voicemails that ranged from defensive to marginally apologetic. "You have to understand our position," he said in one. "Call me back, we can work something out," he said in another. I didn't return the calls. Instead, I began a project, one that should have been done decades ago. First, I dug through old storage boxes, finding faded folders of financial records I'd kept meticulously through years of hardship. Tuition statements, medical bills I'd paid for Ethan's braces while postponing my own dental work, receipts from school supplies, sports equipment, the computer that cost 3 months' rent. In a tattered notebook, I began calculating the loans for Ethan's education that I was still paying off, the second mortgage on my old condo that had funded his unpaid internship, the retirement savings I'd cashed out early, with penalties, when his scholarship fell through. The numbers were staggering, not just in dollars, but in years of my life. Hours worked instead of sleeping. Promotions declined because they would have meant relocating away from Ethan's school. Health problems ignored until they became chronic. On the 4th day, I visited a legal aid clinic, waiting 3 hours to speak with a volunteer attorney. "I have a joint account with my son," I explained. "If I withdraw money, what are the legal implications?" The attorney, a kind-eyed woman near my age, asked several questions, then explained. Joint account holders both have full legal access. Either party can deposit or withdraw funds without the other's permission. That's why they're called joint accounts. "Even if he contributed most of the money," I asked, "the bank doesn't track or care whose deposits are whose. Once money goes into a joint account legally, it belongs equally to both parties." I nodded, processing this information. "May I ask why you're inquiring?" she added gently. I found myself telling her everything. The decades of sacrifice, Ethan's success, his cruel words, my impossible situation. When I finished, she sat quietly for a moment. "What you're describing isn't just a financial relationship. It's an emotional one where money has become a control mechanism," she said finally. "If you're considering making a significant withdrawal, I'd advise documenting exactly why that amount is justified, based on your contributions to his life and education." The next day, I visited 2 different banks. At the first, I opened a new account in my name only. At the second, I reviewed the joint account Ethan had set up, confirming my full access rights. Back home, I began researching places I'd always wanted to visit, but never could. Coastal towns with artist communities, places where housing was affordable on a modest income, areas with decent medical facilities for my ongoing care. On a whim, I ordered a small set of watercolors and brushes online. My first art purchase in over 15 years. When they arrived, I held them like precious artifacts from a life I'd abandoned. I began writing a letter to Ethan, starting and restarting a dozen times. How do you explain to your child that you're about to upend their perception of you completely? In the end, I wrote plainly about both love and boundaries, about giving until it broke me, and about my need to finally prioritize my own survival. Over the weekend, I sorted through my few possessions. Most furniture would stay behind, rented with the apartment. Clothes I rarely wore went to donation. Books, photos, and my mother's old jewelry were packed carefully into 2 suitcases. The night before I planned to leave, I slept better than I had in years. The weight of constantly trying to please a son who saw me as a burden had lifted, replaced by the terrifying but exhilarating prospect of reclaiming my life. For the first time since Ethan was born, I allowed myself to think about my own future without filtering it through his needs or approval. It felt like coming up for air after drowning for 35 years. I woke before dawn on Monday, my mind clear, my purpose set. After a final cup of coffee on my small balcony, I walked through the apartment, touching familiar surfaces. The chipped countertop, the window that never quite closed the wall, where I'd hung Ethan's kindergarten drawings all those years ago. By 7:30, I was parked outside the bank, waiting for it to open. The early morning light cast long shadows as I rehearsed what I would say. When the doors unlocked, I was the first customer inside. The young teller greeted me with practiced cheerfulness. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I need to make a withdrawal from my joint account," I said, sliding over my ID and the account information. She typed something into her computer, then looked up with a slight frown. "That's quite a substantial withdrawal. Would you like a cashier's check?" "A transfer, please, to this account." I handed her the information for my new account at the other bank. Her eyes flickered with concern. "May I ask the purpose of this transfer?" I met her gaze steadily. "Repayment of personal loans and educational expenses I provided over many years. It's all documented." She nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her expression. After several minutes of paperwork and verification, the transaction was complete. I had transferred exactly the amount I had calculated. The loans, the second mortgage, the retirement savings, adjusted for inflation, but without interest. It was actually less than Ethan owed me, but it was enough. Enough to start over. Enough to live modestly for several years while I rebuilt my life. Enough to make a statement. Back at the apartment, I left my old phone on the kitchen counter beside the 8-page letter I'd written to Ethan. In it, I'd detailed every sacrifice, every loan, every moment I'd put his needs above my own health and well-being. I explained exactly how I had calculated the amount I took. I told him I loved him too much to remain in a relationship where love flowed only one way. The bus station was nearly empty mid-morning. I purchased a one-way ticket to a coastal town 3 states away, a place I'd researched extensively that offered affordable housing in a small but vibrant arts community. As the bus pulled away, a weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in decades, no one was depending on me to sacrifice my needs for theirs. The sensation was both terrifying and intoxicating. That first night in a modest roadside motel, I borrowed the desk clerk's phone to check my voicemail. There were 17 messages from Ethan, their tone evolving from confusion to anger to panic. "Mom, where are you? The bank called about a large withdrawal. What the hell do you think you're doing? That money was for emergencies. This is theft. I could call the police. Mom, please, I'm worried about you. Just call me back." His final message, left just an hour earlier, was quieter. "I found your letter. I don't understand how you could do this, but just let me know you're safe." I handed the phone back without returning any calls. Ethan was safe, successful, and surrounded by wealth. For once, I needed to worry about my own safety and future. The next morning, I visited a local art supply store and purchased a small sketch pad. Sitting on a bench overlooking the highway, I drew for the first time in years. Simple lines, capturing the distant mountains, the movement of clouds, the way light played on the pavement. On the second day of my journey, I met Martha, a silver-haired woman traveling to visit her sister. When she asked why I was heading to the coast, I found myself sharing pieces of my story. "Good for you," she said simply. "It's never too late to start living for yourself." Those words stayed with me as the miles passed countryside, giving way to small towns. Then finally, the first glimpse of ocean on the horizon. When I stepped off the bus in my destination, the salt air filled my lungs like a promise. 6 months can change everything. My small rented cottage sits just a 10-minute walk from the beach, its weathered blue siding and white trim now familiar as my own reflection. The front yard, once overgrown with weeds, now hosts a modest vegetable garden and flowering perennials I tend each morning. Inside, the spare bedroom has transformed into a studio. Sunlight streams through east-facing windows, illuminating canvases in various stages of completion. My hands, still gnarled with arthritis, but stronger now, from regular use, move with growing confidence across paper and canvas. The local farmers market allowed me to set up a small booth 3 months ago. My watercolor landscapes and seascapes, modestly priced, sell steadily enough to supplement my careful budget. Each sale feels like validation, a small voice saying, "Your dreams mattered too." I've made friends here, real friends who know nothing of my past success or failures as a mother. Gloria, a retired librarian 2 cottages down, has become like the sister I never had. We walk the beach each morning, collecting shells and trading stories. She lost her partner of 40 years recently and understands something about reinvention. We get second acts if we're brave enough to write them, she told me one evening as we shared a bottle of inexpensive wine on her porch. Thoughts of Ethan still come, of course. On quiet evenings, I wonder how he's doing, whether Allison is pregnant. Yet, if he ever thinks about the woman who taught him to tie his shoes and ride a bike. Love doesn't disappear, even when it's been twisted into unrecognizable shapes. 3 months after I left, a certified letter arrived from a law firm representing Ethan. It demanded the return of misappropriated funds and threatened legal action. I responded with a calm, detailed accounting of every dollar I had spent raising him, educating him, launching his successful life, along with documentation of the ongoing loans in my name. The final tally was nearly triple what I had withdrawn. I concluded by noting that I had consulted with an attorney before taking any action and understood my legal rights regarding joint accounts. 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. This one from Ethan, directly, no lawyer as intermediary. The tone had shifted dramatically. "I've been talking to a therapist," he wrote. "I never saw our relationship the way you described it. I thought I was helping you. I never calculated what you spent raising me. Because that's what parents do, isn't it? But maybe that's the problem. I never really saw you as a person with your own dreams and needs. You were always just mom." He asked if we could start communicating again, perhaps by email at first. No demands, no conditions. I waited a week before responding. When I did, I set clear boundaries. I would not return to my old life or our old relationship dynamic. I would not accept financial help with strings attached. I would not tolerate disrespect or condescension. Our emails since then have been tentative, but increasingly honest. He shared that he and Allison are in couples counseling, that my departure forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself and his marriage. Last month, we had our first video call. He seemed shocked by my appearance, not because I looked unwell, but because I looked happy. My hair, once dyed dark to appear younger for job interviews, now shines natural silver. My clothes are simple but colorful. The walls behind me display my paintings. "You look like yourself," he said, though he couldn't possibly remember me as I was before motherhood consumed my identity. "I'm becoming myself," I corrected gently. "We're planning to meet in person next summer. Neutral territory, a city halfway between us. No rushed reconciliation, no pretending the past didn't happen. Just two adults who share blood and history, attempting to build something new from the ashes of what burned down." The lessons haven't come easily. I've learned that love, without respect, is dependency. That self-preservation isn't selfish, it's necessary. That it's never too late to reclaim your path, even when decades have passed. And perhaps most importantly, that sometimes you have to walk away completely before you can build something healthy. Some nights, I still wake up panicked, wondering if I've made a terrible mistake. But then, morning comes, and with it, the ocean, the paints, the garden, the friends who value me for exactly who I am now. Not for what I sacrificed or what I provide, but simply for being Vicky. Has my story resonated with you in any way? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family obligations and your own well-being? Let me know in the comments below. If this story touched something in you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of rediscovery and healing. Give it a like if you believe it is never too late to start over, and share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth. Thank you for listening, and remember, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself.